We'd like to thank the following sponsors for helping provide this video.
I'd like to welcome our very own David Grabel and Monica Yap. They are going to do a workshop on package Scaling Agile.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Now, this is going to be a very interactive workshop, and it's going to be best if we work in groups. So, people, if you're sitting in the back, if you might get more out of this, if you move forward and take one of the seats or one of the tables, we've got lots of room. You know, it's like the pews in church. So, lots of room up front if you want to join us for that. So, we're going to start first with an exercise at your table. So that's one reason for joining into a table, where we would just like to take about 10 minutes where everybody at your table just explains any experience that you've had at scaling. And there's lots and lots of definition of what means scaling agile at scale. We'd like you to talk about your view of it, and then we'll follow up with some of the things that we've seen of many, many different dimensions of scaling. So we'll take about 10 minutes now if you just get together in table and just share what your experience has been, size of groups, nature of scaling, challenges you've addressed. Okay?
I've worked at several different large
that would always help out, but I think that beyond that,
You need to get them all in the same room at some point. It's really hard because they're busy. Nobody wants to take the time to so, yeah.
I think even this is
more generically, for me, scaling is taking anything that we want adopted personally for me, my situation, current situation, I was brought in to either establish new or enhance processes and get adoption company-wide. Well, not entirely company-wide, but amongst the engineering groups, different business units, different buildings, different sites. And so, it's start off small, get buy-in from a group, get some success, get them to help tell the success story and share it, and just have it spread somewhat through grassroots efforts, but also engage management to show that what you chartered me to do is working, and get them to also endorse and speak up about it.
Were you scaling fast enough?
No.
That means it's time to be fine.
Thank you all. I hope it was, you got to learn a little bit from each other. Let's see where we go. So, just a brief introduction of who we are. So, many of you know me from my prior work with Agile New England, my current work. I'm currently coaching at Vistaprint. There's only a scheduling accident that Vistaprint was the primary speaker at last month's meeting. Just kind of worked out that way. And people seem to enjoy that workshop format, so we're going to try it again. So hopefully we'll get something out of this. It's a different kind of activity, but see how it's working. We've been doing a lot of work together. Monica, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Monica Yap, and like David said, we worked together when I was coaching at PayPal, fairly big scaling type of endeavor there, and I've been coaching since 2004, so it's been around the block a few times. I've done a lot of scaling type of agile adoption with various size of companies. So that's why I'm starting to see there are some patterns that starting to emerge with agile adoption with large groups and large size companies. So that's why I'm so passionate about to do these kind of workshops and also allow us to share some of this knowledge together.
So when we first arranged for this talk, Monica was coaching at Twitter, and since then has gone over to Solutions IQ. So again, only by accident, and we've had a couple of Solutions IQ speakers in the last few months. So without going through all these, just want to give you a sense of all the different companies that we've coached at, and most of these have involved some degree of scaling. So we've got a fair amount of combined experience. Don't need to go through the whole list there. But let's talk about what our goal is for tonight. Specifically, we want to give you some sense of all the different dimensions that Agile at scaling can be, what different people mean by scaling, and then introduce the concept of patterns. Some of you have probably been working with it for a very, very long time. For some of you, this might be new, so I'll give you some level setting on that. We'll share some patterns with you that we've collected because we've done this workshop a couple of times. Monica's done it before, and we're starting to collect patterns which are going to be published. And then the real learning will happen when you get a chance to practice based on whatever experience you have, what you've seen, to create some patterns. So you get to do them yourselves and teach each other how to create patterns related to scaling. And we'll have a time to share what comes out of your workshop at your tables. So that's the goal for tonight. So we're not talking about any particular Agile framework. We're not here to give you the details of SAFe or DAD or Nexus or any of the others that are popular, but more a little bit on the patterns we've seen and more about how you can develop your own patterns that will help you in your workplace. Okay. And afterwards, we're going to ask you to share. Okay. Some of it we'll share here with each other. You can blog about it. You can share it within your community. And we're working with Solutions IQ to put up a pattern site where people will be able to publish their own scaling patterns to that site. So the whole point is to give back to the community and help them learn as much as possible. So just so that we're kind of level set, let's talk about what we mean by scaling. So you've just had a chance to talk about it. If we can get a few people, just what are some of the key things that came out of your conversation? What do you consider Agile at scale?
Lots of teams.
Lots of teams. Mm-hmm. Anything else?
Complicated projects.
Complicated projects.
Lots of dependencies.
Yep.
Lots of dependencies. Yes, lots of dependencies.
Distributed teams.
Yeah. So we've seen that there are different degrees of scaling, and each of those degrees provide different sets of challenges. And the patterns that you might come up with, or that you might try to apply, depends on which of these aspects are most important in your environment. So I spoke to one of the Nexus architects. Nexus is Ken Schwaber's organization, Scrum.org, and that's their scaling framework. And I asked him, what does Agile at scale mean to them? Okay? And I was actually surprised at this at first, where he said, it's 2 or more teams working on the same code base. And at first I said, well, that's not really at scale, because we do a couple of teams all the time. But the key is working on the same code base, because that triggers the dependencies that somebody mentioned that makes scaling a real challenge. So that's the sort of the baseline minimum somebody's definition of scale, which might work for you. Some people said lots of teams. In some cases, it's 10 or more teams working on the same project. And so getting up another order of magnitude introduces new challenges. When you take it to multiple locations, we did a scaling project where we were in 12 locations around the world, and it was always 4 o'clock in the morning somewhere. So with all of our calls, there was always at least one site that wasn't included, but we tried to rotate that as much as possible. Then you get it where you scale to hundreds of teams on a project. And in some cases, it goes enterprise-wide, where you're looking for thousands of teams across an entire enterprise. And in talking to various people, we've seen each of these orders of magnitude bring new challenges that cause them to bring new sets of patterns to work on. But again, as somebody says, it's all about the dependencies. And it's managing those dependencies that really can be the bane of a scaled agile organization, or if managed properly, can make it work. Now, we've also seen scaling go beyond just the number of teams, but the kind of work they do. So we're beginning to see scaling across different kinds of disciplines. So I've been doing work using the Agile Marketing Manifesto, there actually is such a thing, which doesn't mention software, but is actually pretty useful, and transforming marketing teams and advertising agencies. Nancy has given talks here and lots of other places on bringing Agile to hardware. So when you bring hardware and software teams together, or Agile at manufacturing. I did a training where we trained our entire corporate legal staff, the 25 attorneys around the world, where we were beginning to train them on Agile and open up their eyes to places where they can do it. So, and then the big lever, the big winning point would be human resources. So we actually had our human resources organization trying to revamp their everybody's favorite bugaboo, the performance evaluation system, and we actually facilitated 2 open space events, one in each of our 2 major locations, where the HR department used that mechanism to get input on how they should revamp the performance evaluation system. So.
David? Also, I want to mention that IT and operation is another big group of people that we also need to bring into the kind of end-to-end delivery as well. In addition to UX, localization, all those folks, as part of the ready stream delivery.
Absolutely. And then there's scaling to the portfolio level. So that's where you go beyond the technologists and the product developers, but you get up to the strategy level. And there are some scaling frameworks that have adopted, built in some very good mechanisms which talk about going from project management to program management to portfolio management, and looking at things at the portfolio level and doing a different kind of planning, whether it's release planning or roadmap planning or whatever. But that's another dimension of scaling. So, any questions on the different degrees of scaling, different approaches? Anybody else seen anything different than what we've covered here? Okay, so now Monica, you want to talk a little bit about patterns?
Okay. When people think about patterns, if you're not already familiar with what we mean here, you may think about, oh, it's this thing that I see in nature that repeated itself. Actually, that's kind of true. Some of the patterns I'm going to show you is actually fractal, meaning you see it repeat itself in a larger or smaller scale. But what we want to do a little bit level setting here is what we mean by patterns in our scaling, in terms of scale. So this guy, some of you may have heard of him, Christopher Alexander. Anybody heard him before? Okay. good. Some of you have heard of him. He's really the guy that kind of really concretized this concept of pattern language. And he has many books, in which these two are actually the two that is my favorite: pattern language and the timeless way of building. So he created this pattern concept that you can apply many, many times in designing buildings and constructs, physical constructs, not software designs. Okay, so what he means by a pattern, there's 3 pieces to it, 3 components. One big component is what is the problem we try to solve? And the second piece is what is the context? And also the third piece is what are the repeatable solutions that we can solve this problem within this context. So the example we're showing you here is a courtyard. So a courtyard, we all have seen a courtyard in our lives, right? But they're applied, they could look completely differently in 3 different cultures in 3 different parts of the world. But they all created design to solve a particular problem, which is allow groups of people that are not living together or not even that closely related together have a common place to go meet up with each other and share their experience or share their relationships. Okay. You can see these 3 different applications are very dramatically different. That's the beauty of the pattern, is that it's the same solution, but it's adapted differently in your particular environment that solve the same problem that you have. Okay, so how does this relate to software? Have any of you seen some of these? Again, for design pattern, collection pool. If you use a database, you have used a collection pool by now in this modern age. So, and model with controller, if you use a website, you're going to, most of the website are written with that pattern in mind. So these are the patterns that have adapted many different times in different programming language, different technical platform, that using the same solution constructs. And they're very powerful because you can see them being reused again and again, even that's why it's called timeless. So those are the software design patterns, or some of it, which is also, there are also architectural design patterns as well. Now, how does that relate to scaling? As I mentioned, that after I've gone through worked at different places and different companies, and now I'm at EMC, and I've seen a lot of this common problem that kind of across different type of enterprise, different type of organization. And some of which also have common context. And some of it even have a common solution, but adapted differently in their local environment. And also by working with other coaches and collaborating with other coaches in the industry, I started seeing all these different patterns started to emerge. So that's why David, myself, and Paul, and other coaches start creating a library of patterns that we like to get you all involved as well in the community to contribute to it. So give you some 3 concrete examples. Can people in the back read it? Too small? Okay. I can read it for you. So if you also can come up a little bit. So the first one is an example. Sorry, I can't fit it any bigger into this one slide. It's called the organizational impediment. So the problem is there are a lot of impediments or roadblocks that don't allow team to be agile or don't allow the team to be efficient. And these are the impediments that cannot be solved at any given local team. Okay. And the context is also there isn't always a clear escalation path or clear structure how to get these impediments or roadblocks resolved. So they just stopped there. People just becoming complacent. Oh, that's just something. Yeah, we know that. Oh yeah, you just start hearing that. So here's some solution, a solution that I seen work over and over again, but adapt differently in different organizations. Is if you start tracking an impediment backlog at each level, meaning each Agile team track their own impediment at their level. And when these teams working in a common program or common product, that common program also have a way of tracking the cross-team impediments and roadblocks at their level. And when those teams exist within a business unit or enterprise or organization, there are things that organizationally roadblocks. They're not program level or team level roadblocks. Those need to be tracked at the higher level as well in the organization itself. So this, you start seeing that fractal part, right, of the patterns. Then we need to set up some kind of construct with people that have empowered to solve these impediments or roadblocks at the appropriate levels. We need them to regularly have a forum to meet together, prioritize this. We're not saying let's solve all the problems in the world at the same time. Let's prioritize this. Let's tick them off one at a time at a regular interval. And also, if there are any new roadblocks emerge, then we need to add it just like a product backlog. We add it to the list, we prioritize them, we tackle the high priority ones, and keep moving. So that's that one. The next one is harder. It's called Agile Squared. Okay, why is it called Agile Squared? Because we're using the concept of Agile to apply to Agile transformation. The problem is, you hear David talk about SAFe and DAS, DAD-less, Nexus, etc., etc. These are all great frameworks. However, what I find and other people find is us humans are complex systems. And groups of humans together form even bigger complex systems, right? And some of these organizations and companies are also including companies they bought from others that merge into their company. So naturally, you've got enterprises that have different micro-cultures within the enterprise itself. So we don't really effectively can't apply a particular formula and say, this is the one size that can fit all of your groups within your enterprise or company. Some companies even have a primary culture and a secondary culture within certain groups. So we need a way to inspect and adapt how to transform these smaller groups or this micro groups within the enterprise effectively. So the solution to this is setting up a transformational team to start creating a vision and roadmap to do the transformation, and also setting up a agile transformation cross-functional teams within each of the smaller groups within the organization that allow them to take from the agile value principles and the roadmaps and adapt it to their local context within the organization and doing the inspect and adapt. And I've seen this done in different places, and it works really well. Okay. Now, the hard part of this is, earlier I said this is one of the harder ones, right? Is how do you get those people become the agile team? You have to transform them first, in the first place. So it takes time to do that. It's not like something that you can just implement right away. It may take time to go from one group to another group to another group.
Can I just add something too? So I like what you said. It takes time for even the agile transformation team to gel. But I would even extend that to say sometimes it just needs to be recognized that they should in fact be a team and not just a group of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I had an experience that when I was at Symantec, we actually set up a cross-functional leadership team at the program level for each of the product, and then we started setting up leadership team across the whole enterprise. But it was not done from the beginning. It was kind of like organically growing effect that was created. Any other questions, comments? Okay. This last one, well, there are many of them. We're just showing you three of the set here. Is called the retrospective retrospective of retrospectives. Some of you may already seen this or done this. Who have seen this? Done this? Okay, great. Okay. This one is actually an easier one to implement. So that also, this one supports the other two, the previous two I showed you, the impediments and the Agile Square. Because where does the impediment show up? Where do you actually recognize you have an impediment? In retrospective, yes, absolutely. I've seen so many depressing retrospective because some of the impediments could go nowhere. Because the team can resolve their own impediment, but there are environmental impediments and organizational impediments that the team cannot resolve themselves. So this is a mechanism to allow the team to do their retrospective effectively, take actions on things that they are empowered to change, and take the ones that they cannot change directly but should be able to influence to the next level up. And having a retrospective at the next level up, and so on and so forth. This is also another fractal type of pattern. So if you apply this effectively, you're able to service those impediments succinctly and regularly in the enterprise, and able to actually use the other pattern to work on. How many people here have done it? I've seen a couple hands. What was your experience of have done it?
I thought it was very effective, but we ended up starting it and then stopping it and then starting it again, because when we first started it, we realized that the organization wasn't quite mature enough for it yet. There was a lot around trying to get people into a retrospective pattern where they were starting to really have meaningful conversations and meaningful results, and it took a while to get them to a point where they were having meaningful enough results to not have the retros be a little bit more of a sort of a chaotic kind of thing. And so we resumed it, and it worked much better at that point. The other thing I would add is that it's also a place for people to bring things, not just that they can't solve themselves, but that they think might be of benefit to everybody else as well.
Share that information. Any other comments?
Just a comment on it's hard. You're talking about the scaling across locations. That really doesn't work. I haven't seen it work that way. It's multiple teams in the same location, a retrospective. Worked well. You had the face-to-face understanding of the things you're trying to retrospect on. But the level of human communication needed in order to do that didn't scale over multiple locations. Kind of needed a different approach, or at least from the ones we tried.
Right. Anyone have done remote retrospectives?
Yeah. Actually, it is tough to do it remote, but if you have a couple of teams that are working in different places, then I think you must do these kind of things even if they're tough. Otherwise, what's going to help that they're doing the perspectives in each place and you're not connecting it? And actually, I agree this is one of the most important patterns for scaling. When we go into organizations and try to help them do Agile, it's something that we do even in the beginning. And a lot of our time as coaches is actually spent making those work and making sure that people don't just, use this as a place to surface all of the problems that they didn't want to solve in the team, and making sure that a lot of stuff still gets done at the team level. That's a danger with this pattern, so it requires some work, but it's a very powerful one.
Yeah, so 2 quick thoughts. So there actually are distributed retrospective tools out there that you can use. So that's something to look for if you're having challenges trying to visualize a lot of the board stuff. But the other challenge I've seen with RORs is you learn that some people shouldn't really be in the room. So, I mean, I hate to use the analogy of chickens and the pigs, but you'll find that, I'll say, there's not even chickens and the pigs in the room. Sometimes they're just seagulls, flying around you. So you have to learn how to get them out of the room. Thank you.
Yeah, the same rules of a local team retrospective still apply in the higher level. Yep.
Another challenge that I've seen, at least with the RORs, is generally the folks representing the teams at these, tend to be, line managers or somebody higher up, and trying to, they will represent the challenges with the teams. However, get them to prioritize and rank and agree upon a solution and on a consensus basis is a challenge. If the representatives are not directly from the teams, but they are representing the teams that, that are under either their group within the product or line managers, whatever the case.
So this is where the art of the adaptation of these patterns comes in, right? So for some environment, maybe that is safe and it's okay to have the managers to be the representative of the team. And in some instance, we may want to have rotating representative from actors within the team itself, so they're getting that true representation of these teams.
One more comment is that it sometimes makes sense to, ideally, you would want to have everybody involved, not just representatives in that sort of retrospective in order for people to be engaged, but to do it every sprint doesn't make too much sense, so you need their representation. But what we typically do, and works pretty well, is every couple of sprints, like every release, PI, whatever you want to call it, every couple of times, try to do something where everybody is together and they work in teams based on themes that they want to discuss, and it keeps things interesting and brings up some powerful stuff once in a while.
So my partner's giving me a signal we need to move forward to the next component of this. Oh, one thing I want to say about NP. So let's not forget about that. One thing that we want to focus on, there is software anti-patterns. There's actually a book written about it. However, what we find in terms of adopting Agile, having anti-pattern doesn't really help, because it's still anti, it's still there, problem still there. So that's why we want to focus on how do we convert from anti-patterns into a solution that can solve the problem. So anti-pattern typically speaks about the problem and context, but without a solution. So that's why we're focusing more our energy on pattern, on scaling here, rather than anti-pattern.
So we found that any anti-pattern can be restated as a pattern, and then it gives you something that's easier to repeat rather than something just to avoid. So a little too much of a cop-out just to say don't do this. It's much more interesting to say, when you see this problem, what is it that you do? So now we're going to ask each of you in your teams to try to work out, identify some patterns using the format that we've shown here that is based on your experiences. What are the patterns that you've seen? What are the problems they've solved? What are the solutions you put into it? And we're going to give you a format. There should be a large sheet of paper, 2 or 3 of those at every table, and a Sharpie. You might have to move the tables together to get the right workspace. But if you come together and work on the tables of 6 to 8 people together, that'll be most effective. And we've got a bunch of themes here that we've selected that you could use for patterns, dependencies. You can read all these. Or if there's something that you've worked on or something that you're particularly passionate about and you want to develop at your table that's a theme beyond this, go ahead, pick one. These are just suggestions, they're not prescriptive. So we're going to have, first of all, we want you to, within your table, pick a theme, either the ones that we've had there or one that you have yourself, and take about 5 minutes to brainstorm, discuss, not vote, whatever works with you, on the pattern or patterns that are most interesting to you, or most challenging, or most important. Okay. So just take 5 minutes or a quick brainstorming activity to identify a pattern you want to work on, and then create and resolve it. So use the format which indicates what's the context, what's the problem, what's the context, what's the solution. So we ask you to start by one person at each table drawing something that looks roughly like that on your pad. That's the format that we found that works best. So, whoever's near that. Good. Just want to
If I do this, that makes sense to facilitate the discussion. So we're distributing the systems. Megan, let me see future themes in your main work.
I was thinking back to that organizational.
All right. Come back together.
Okay, so somebody wants to point out it's interesting. Right? Outside of Agile, you raise your hand to talk, and in Agile, you raise your hand to stop talking. In any event, we'd like, how did this work out for you? Did you get some things done? Learn a little bit? All right, so we'd like to take the next 5 or 10 minutes just to have some tables share what the pattern you developed, the theme, the problem statement, the context, the solution, and if you had any examples of words used.
All right, so Chris is going to be my model. Thanks, Dana. Okay, so we're still working out the title and the theme, but it's around executive buy-in. The problem that we had is execs need to understand and demonstrate operating with agile principles for scaling to happen more effectively. And then some of the context that we had is like multiple teams not aligned, teams competing with each other, hey. Inadequate support, resources, that's both people and money. Ceremonies abandoned, our favorite resource, poaching. One of my clients hated that when I called it that. Directive, somebody who's a knower. I'm going to direct you to do something versus a servant leadership or asking. And then lastly, it all came down to lack of trust and empowering your folks to actually do what you need them to do. That's what you hired them to do. Solutions, awareness and real-time coaching feedback from execs, with execs from people who've done this before. We wanted to say it's not necessarily coaches, because you've had other executives who've done this before, hopefully. So it's not necessarily coaching is the answer, but it's people who've done this before in that capacity. Things such as empowering teams to call out bad exec behavior, but also giving them the opportunity to say, hey, that was really good. So it's both the positive and the negative there. A couple other things, cohorts, leadership cohorts, and then my favorite topic is adjusting the bonuses to org output, not individuals or departments. Where we've used it before is in finance, communications, and insurance.
Gee, I wanted to be the spokesmodel. but Peter's going to do that, and this pattern is actually based on Peter's experience, and we've called it sprint pairing, and it's a way of scaling knowledge transfer. And the problem that we're describing is one in which there are knowledge silos in an organization and a lot of bottlenecks because there are a limited number of subject matter experts. And in particular, it's been seen in different kinds of situations. One of them is you've got a lot of projects, a limited number of resources who have the expertise. And the other thing that we particularly focused on was the idea that you have multiple specialties needed to solve a very complex problem, and again, experts who live in their own specialties, and that's what they focus on. And the solution that Peter described to us was in pairing an expert with a non-expert, any non-expert. That non-expert could be an expert in something else, or it could be a new person who's a new hire. And they're paired for the length of an entire sprint. Now, please correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, but what I thought I heard you say is that at the end of a sprint, depending upon what's going on in the organization and your own preferences, you might stay paired with the same person, or you might pair with somebody else at this point. And the idea of this kind of solution is the job gets done, and at the same time, we've got knowledge transferred, and it actually is often a two-way street, because you could have two experts who are paired with each other, and they're each learning each other's knowledge. And Scott Adler had a very nice phrase for this kind of thing. He calls it generalizing specialists, the idea that you remain a specialist in your own thing, but you're able to take on the knowledge and be able to, if you will, roll up your sleeves and pitch in whenever is necessary. So knowledge then gets transferred. Where could you use it? Anywhere there's scarce knowledge resources.
One thing to add for scaling, since this is talking about scaling, it works better if the sprint for every team starts on the same day, ends on the same day. Therefore, everyone is able to transfer to a new group at the same time.
Thanks, Peter. Who'd like to go next? You guys want to share?
Ours is about preserving autonomy. And theme is the agile mindset. So the problem is, how do you scale your process and your product without being highly prescriptive? The context is when you have multiple teams sharing code and integrating outputs, and an organizational need to coordinate work across teams. Solutions communicate problems to solve rather than orders to execute. Use relative metrics, so rather than put absolutes down that don't necessarily hold across teams, look at deltas rather than absolutes. Break dependencies, so make teams as fully capable across the stack as possible so that they can exercise an autonomy that doesn't necessarily get inhibited by the dependencies between the different groups. Govern to outcomes, not processes and methods. So don't tell people how to do something, tell them what you expect of them. And then have mechanisms to support functional communities. If you are going to do things that start going cross-stack, you still want to preserve, for example, people who share a technology or people who share a business interest to communicate and collaborate with each other in ways that preserve that aspect of their social dynamic. I couldn't remember what the bottom section was, so we've used examples instead of things like normalize schedules by dates instead of by estimation methods. So rather than normalizing your story points, hey, calendars have helped us normalize things for thousands of years. Have minimum standards for code quality that teams have to meet, and tools to enforce it, rather than requiring everybody to do exactly the same process and exactly the same technique. And in this kind of framework, you can actually mix Scrum and Kanban, and it doesn't matter.
Very good.
found that the theme, everyone was talking about their experiences at work, and we found that there was a common theme of geographical distribution. Seems to be something almost everyone could identify with. We started brainstorming a lot, and you can tell we were talking about all the problems we ran into, and we were talking about cultural differences, timing, communication, different cultures in different local offices, the planning, different levels of professional maturity. And it seemed like there were so many problems that we called Dave over to maybe redirect our thinking. And it was very useful because he said those sounded more like contexts for a major problem. So it refocused what we were thinking into saying, what does all of this culminate in? And it just was a large problem that we would have delayed delivery or a slow value flow through the system. So we flipped things a little. And then solutions was great because everyone could pull from their own experiences. And one of them was mechanisms to share, like a common document sharing or wiki that people could communicate through, or handoff of communications. A lot of people have dealt with teams in different time zones, and we found that it would be very effective, that maybe it wouldn't be feeling like you waited for 24 hours for a communication, but to set up something where you could hand off communications. So as one team is closing down work, another team was pulling into work, and then you would basically be able to set up a 24-hour chain of work and communication. So that would be trying to work the multiple time zones to actually an advantage rather than a disadvantage. Centers of excellence for distributed work. A lot of times people found that certain locations had an expertise in one part of development or another. So begin to identify those and start slicing and parsing out work for those different locations. And then the fourth is something we've all talked about, scrum of scrums, but actually organize the scrum of scrums by different locations. They get to talk to each other in their time zones and then find a common time to pull together and do the scrum of scrums. That's it. We didn't come up with a pattern name. We ran out of time.
So let's just finish up with a few last comments here. As we mentioned, we'd like each of you to share what you came out of this in whatever way is best for you. You want to take pictures of what you did. You want to try it, share your experience with other people in your office, write blogs about it, share it with your community. And when the pattern site goes live, we will post information, and if you care, you can contribute to that site as well. Just an option for you. If you have any further questions, anything you want to discuss with us further, here's contact information for Monica and myself. Please feel free to reach out to us. Okay. So that's it. And are there any questions? Any questions at this point? Great, then I'll turn the program back over to Tom.